Let me say good morning to everybody. Good morning. Yeah, 9 a.m. is tough. This is the first time we've been doing this forum, our fraternity, going on 10 years, and we usually have a little bit of leeway around 11, 12 to kind of get that reception party stuff done by 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then we can get up and come to sessions. So CBC usually drags with these early morning sessions, but certainly it's always an honor to host these forums on behalf of our fraternity, Omega Psi Phi. My name is Thabiti Boone, member of, I say that with ultimate humility and admiration that I'm proud to be a member of this organization, not just because we're Omega men, but because of the work that we do. Our commitment to do things that sometimes other people just won't do. And so I just want to bring you greetings on behalf of our brand new Grand Bossless, Dr. David Marion, our 41st Grand Bossless. Please stand and let's salute our Grand Bossless. And let me say this, Omega Psi Phi, we pride ourselves on our leadership that guides our vision, that guides the wishes of our founders that created our organization based on manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. So Dr. Marion comes in that rich tradition. So I think he is more than capable of continuing to lead our organization. And I heard him speak 2 days ago on the Panhell panel. And I tell you, all due respect to the others, but that man speaks well for us. And he speaks well about the issues that is confronting us as a people. So Dr. Marion, we will be 100% behind your leadership. So thank you. But he didn't get in his position without the former Grand. Antonio Knox, who's been one of the longest serving Grand officers that we've had in this fraternity. And so we want to acknowledge our former Grand who has done so much, particularly under our partnership with President Obama, that ushered us and led us through that partnership with the White House. Former Grand Antonio Knox, please stand. And he can't travel without the former First Lady of our organization. Sister Angela, always an honor to see you. And without our wives and our women that really, stands not behind us, but with us, we can't do what we do. So it's always an honor. Sister Kara, who just serves our organization and every Grand Bossless and handling headquarters, we thank you and appreciate you, our AKA sister. We appreciate you. And I just want to also acknowledge our new Grand Officers. Can you please stand? I see Brother Jackson. I see Brother Ricky Lewis. And let me say this about Brother Ricky Lewis, why we're so proud of him being second in command and charge as our first vice. This man is the pillar of what we talk about mentoring our young black boys. For nearly 30 years out there in California, he has been leading and hosting, along with the brothers out there, the Youth Leadership Conference. And Brother Ricky, what you have been doing with that has been a model, not just for our fraternity, but just a model for the work that we're all doing now in our country around how do we uplift our boys. So again, thank you so much. And he always has his wife and his soldier, who is now getting taller and taller and bigger. And how you doing? Okay. All right, so I want to first introduce our panel, and then of course, what I would like to do, if you don't mind, just to kind of get us started with a quick word of prayer to kind of set the tone spiritually for us. So I would like to have our grand chaplain, Brother Richardson, to come up and just kind of do that for us. Just, yeah. Then after that, I'll introduce the panel, and then we'll bring up our distinguished Congressman, Brother Clyburn, to kind of set the tone for us in our conversation. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. There are some other grand officers with us and other members of the Supreme Council that I would take time to introduce. Brother Jones is with us. He's our Grand KF. The youngest member of our group of grand officers is our second vice Grand Basileus, Brother Tatum. I think that concludes the members of our grand officers, and then we have certain of our foundation president is here, has come to stand, Brother Brown. And several DRs, current and former, are here. I'm going to ask all of them to stand and be recognized at this time. Brother Brown. Let's pray. Gracious God, how thankful we are for this day. We recognize your presence with us. We thank you afresh for your magnificent benevolence to each of us. You've been unnecessarily good to us to provide us another opportunity to take advantage of your goodness and your mercy. So thank you for this gathering of like-minded people come together to make our situations better. Give us the appropriate words for this appropriate time to talk about those instances and those occasions where we have omitted your voice and your counsel. Help us to think with your mind and to speak with your voice. This time together, as we focus on men, young and old, help us, guide us, and then guard us with all manner of truth, that we might leave here transformed and better able to handle the challenges of this day. And whatever I failed in asking that relates to this time together, please feel free to grant. For it's in the matchless and mighty and miraculous name of that Negro from Nazareth named Jesus that we pray. Jesus. And all the people of God said, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Brother Chaplain. One person I just want to quickly mention that we're also very proud of his leadership and what he has done to kind of help chair and guide our Fatherhood and Mentoring Initiative platform, Brother Robert Fairchild, who now serves as the advisor to our Grand Basileus on Fatherhood Mentoring Initiatives. Brother Robert Fairchild. Let's just jump right into this. While we're here, I've been an activist for a long time. I've been leading these conversations at the CBC for a long time. But this conversation in particular is very personal and very important to all of us. If you look at the CBC agenda for the 4 days that people are here, you rarely see anything about black men. You rarely see anything about black boys. But you will see about 80% or more of the forums, the panels, the town halls, the conversations has been about the power of women, voting, activism, getting involved, getting engaged, running for office. You hear that conversation around the country. Women are leading, women are stepping up, women are making it happen. And what I don't want to see happen in that conversation is several things. We applaud our women for doing that. But we cannot forget the role that our men play and how important it is to have our men in place in the home, in the community, voting, holding office, raising our voices, being heard, standing in the gap for our women, children, families, and community. So we have to rally, and we have to figure this out, that all that we're doing, we have to have a conversation of what is causing men to not vote. What is causing men to distrust, no matter what party you belong to? Where's the distrust around men saying, why should I vote? And I don't see my issues being represented. Some people are asking, well, where is our men, Brother Congressman? When you look at mass incarceration, we still have this generation of boys and men growing up in fatherless homes. You're seeing black men and boys still being targeted. Police brutality, racism, unemployment, inequality, keeping us out of the mainstream of this society. And what has happened is that when you push us so far out to think that we're not needed, and you think you want to move this country and the black agenda forward, you cannot do that without men. And we have to play our part and be responsible around making that happen. So I asked some panelists to come and help us have this conversation. We have Jamal Watkins, the Vice President of NAACP, Pacific Engagement. And all of us know the history of the NAACP around what they have done in terms of moving civil rights legislation, voting rights, dealing with voter suppression. But I've asked him to come here and help us to identify where are our men at? What is the data saying about men and voting? We came out and voted, not as much as our black women, for President Obama, the first term and the second term. We fell off with 2016. And we fell off for two reasons. One, and we got to talk about this as well, there were a lot of men who did not want to see a woman in power. And there's a lot of men who don't want to see women in local power, gubernatorial power, congressional power, and we have to make sure that we're not having this gender issue among ourselves, this patriarchy, that women cannot lead, whether it's in office, whether it's in our churches, whether it's in our communities. So what has happened, we had more black men vote for Trump. And I know there's no black men in here who did that. But that was a serious number. And then we had people less voting for Hillary in the Democratic Party. So we had that dynamic, and then we get what we got now. So as 2020 comes, we can't make that mistake again. That's why we say we got to have all hands on deck. As a people, has to push this agenda together, and we cannot push it without our men. And that's why we're here. We have Minister John Kirsten Foy out of New York City, my good friend with the National Action Network. Everybody hears a lot about Reverend Sharpton, his activism with the organization, but Minister John Kirsten Foy is one of the top activists and leaders, not only in New York City, but in the country. He's the Northeast Regional Representative of the National Action Network. This man has been arrested more times than he ever been home.
Voluntarily.
From gun violence to policies that are impacting our communities, to dealing with voting rights, legislation, being on the Hill, sitting down with governors and elected officials fighting on our behalf. In terms of civil rights, I've asked my brother to come and again, draw the connection between civil rights activism and our black men. We have next my sister and good friend, Ms. Deborah Frazier. She's the CEO of the National Healthy Start Association. She has over 30, 40 years in the field of working with fathers, families, and children one of the top federal agencies and programs across this country in terms of uplifting fathers. We've been having a partnership with Ms. Frazier for the last 2-3 years. She's a friend of Omega Psi Phi. We participated with her forums and her summits and her conferences, and we've asked her to come to not only tell us why fatherhood still matters. We like to think that fathers do not matter. Why fatherhood still matters, the great work that they're doing with their fathers in their organization, but also how are they getting their fathers not only just the services and resources, but how do you get those fathers once they get on their feet to be responsible and there for their families, but also how do we get them to be responsible to vote as well? And she also works with those fathers who are incarcerated, unemployed, those kind of dads that just trying to get themselves together, who are also being voter suppressed, can't get to the polls because of the barriers that they're facing every day in their lives. And then we have our brother, Nick Charles, one of the most esteemed elected officials in the state of Maryland. He's the nominee for the state delegate of Maryland, done a lot of great work. He's always active everywhere in DC, Virginia, Maryland, around the work he's doing. So I asked him to come and just talk politically around how the politics, the policies, the legislation affects fathers and men, but also what are some of those issues that are not being addressed politically that keeps men from voting. And then we have our new International Fatherhood Mentoring Chair, who also is responsible for our big brother, big sister relationship and initiative. And also, Ricky has asked him, along with our grand bosses, to help guide the future direction of our youth leadership conference, but also how do we galvanize with all the great work that we're doing in our fraternity in mentoring. We have Brother Earl Wilson. And Earl's going to talk about our voting campaign that we have right now, as well as all the other initiatives we're doing. So what I want to do right now, as protocol, I want to introduce one of the highest ranking members, leaders in Congress. He's our fraternity brother, always on the front line, always raising the issues for us, always fighting for us, never skipping a beat, never skipping a moment. And we have for always hosting this forum for us, always stepping up with your office, making it happen. So Congressman Clyde Brown, we appreciate you so much. And can we please welcome Congressman Jim Clyburn, our esteemed Omega Psi Phi brother.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure for me to once again welcome you to this annual event. Having been a member of the Congressional Black Caucus now for 26 years, I look forward to this. I serve, as many of you know, as a past chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and we are very, very pleased to be a part of this. Now, let me make clear that the annual legislative conference is the work of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We do not, as members of Congress, direct the caucus by law. We cannot. There's a firewall between the elected officials and the members of the foundation. And so whatever I say here today, I don't speak for the foundation. I speak for the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, the elected members. And so let me welcome all of you, our Grand Bachelors. Thank you so much, Dr. Marion, for your service and for what I know you're going to do for us during your tenure. You and all the other members of the Supreme Council, thank you all so much. Past Grandmaster, my southern brother, he's my northern southern brother. I'm from South Carolina. He's from North Carolina. Antonio Knox, thank you. You and all other past officers, thank you all so much for all that you do. When I walked in through the door, I saw my first cousin once removed, who always calls me uncle, but he really ain't my nephew. I walked over to him because I know he's an American. I said, "Are your dues paid?" Well, he wasn't quite sure. Brother Fairchild, thank you so much for the work you do with my office, and we apologize. This room is smaller than it usually is, but as I said, we are in a bit of transition with the foundation. But moving the time of this panel up to 9 o'clock kind of guarantees you're going to cut down on the crowd. In fact, I have a panel every year that's always been scheduled around 10 on environmental justice. And I said to them this year, I says, how let's push this panel to around 11 to give my participants a little more time to sober up. And then I look and they moved this up to 9. Now, knowing Omegas as I do, I knew right then this crowd would be cut down significantly this morning. I saw some of you all last night, so I know of what I speak. Congressman Hank Johnson from Georgia. Come in, Hank. Hank, you just sit next to Bill there, right here, Bill Clyburn. Sit down and I'll yield to you in a minute. Now I know that would break with protocol, and I apologize for that. But you don't get to be chair of the Congressional Black Caucus by not honoring the members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And you'll get to remain in leadership as the number 3 Democrat in the House without the support of the caucus. I try to represent them. But I'm going to say just a couple of things to you about this year. I was born and raised in a little town of Sumter, South Carolina. Sumter is about 22 miles from the town of Summerton, South Carolina. Summerton, South Carolina is where the activities started by Reverend J.D. Lane led to what became Brown versus Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas. I was in Topeka, Kansas on this past Sunday afternoon, where they have the tremendous monument dedicated to Brown versus Board of Education. Now, the reason the monument is in Topeka, Kansas is because one of the 5 cases going up the Supreme Court came from Kansas. However, the original case came out of the little town of Summerton, South Carolina. Now, so why is the monument in Kansas and not in Summerton, South Carolina, where it all started? Where 2 people, Harry and Elijah Briggs. Harry Briggs was an unlettered worker making $22 a week as a service station attendant. His wife, Eliza, unlettered worker, making $18 a week as a child lady at a local motel. Both of them were fired from their jobs when they filed that lawsuit, and they lived out their productive lives in the state of Florida because nobody would touch them in South Carolina. I point that out because most, if not all of us in this room are pretty lettered. I point this out because it does not require being lettered to have guts. It does not require being lettered to have dreams and aspirations for your children. They signed that petition because they wanted their children to have a better life, a life better than theirs. So then why have we not honored them? Well, politics. Bob Dole from Kansas was a United States Senator when we brought those cases through, when we set out to honor them. So the monument got placed in Topeka, Kansas. Though the effort started in South Carolina, Virginia, those of you from Virginia, the Davis case out of Virginia. If you're from Washington, D.C., the Bolton case out of Washington, D.C. If you're from Delaware, the Belton case coming out of Delaware. Brown was not about integration because they had already integrated their schools. Brown was all about speeding up integration. But it all goes there because of politics. Now, we can talk all we want about all of the issues that affects us and our children. The fact of the matter is, these decisions are political decisions day in and day out. And for the life of me, I never could understand why it is that we find it so in vogue to vote when the presidential election is going on. But when a gubernatorial election is going on, which used to take place in the off-year elections, we don't vote. And then we complain about what's going on in our schools. No president is coming to your school board meeting. But when it's time to elect the school board members, we don't find that to be necessary to vote. There's something wrong-headed about that. Governors. We don't have a presidential election this year. But we got 3 African Americans with great chances of becoming governors of their states, and if tradition holds, black person after black person will not show up at the polls. We just don't vote, don't care who's on the ticket in off-year elections. And so Andrew Gillum, on yesterday, leading by 4 points in the polls, none of that is going to matter if we don't show up to vote. Stacey Abrams, last time I checked, she's leading by 2 points in one poll, 1 point in another poll, with a great chance, and tied in another, I'll just make it with you, but with a great chance of being governor of Georgia. In fact, I'm not too sure that her chance is not better than anybody else, if we turn out to vote. Ben Jealous, a real uphill battle, but a battle that can be climbed if we turn out to vote. We just mentioned what I do I go home every weekend. Went home last weekend on the way back up here on Wednesday. I got up early in the morning. I saw the news, and it looked as if the eye of the storm was going to hit right across the little town of Sumter, where I was born, in Columbia, where I live. My wife has had significant health issues. And so I decided, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and when I saw the news, I called my daughter Jennifer. We loaded up. My wife takes the peritoneal kidney thing every night. It's an 8-hour treatment. But I loaded up those boxes, loaded up that machine, got her motor card, borrowed one daughter's car or truck, and called Jennifer and says, we're going to take your mama to Washington. And so I brought her up here. And some of you are seeing her rolling around here. I brought her up here because I wanted to be able to meet with you guys after having slept well. And I wanted her to sleep well. She hasn't been up here in a while, but she's here. I say that to say this. This election this year is the most consequential election ever held in this country. I'm not making this up. George Santayana once wrote, if we fail to learn the lessons of our history, we're bound to repeat them. We've got the lessons of history. We know what the history is. I'm not the first black person to serve in Congress from South Carolina. I'm the first in 95 years. But I'm the 9th black person to represent South Carolina in the United States Congress. So what happened in the 95 years in between George Washington Murray and me? A political decision was made in 1895 that changed the constitutions all over the South. The results of an election in 1876, changed the trajectory. And for 95 years, we as a people lived in the wilderness because of a political decision, because of a vote that took place in 1876. When the elections in the United States House of Representatives got thrown into the Congress. And guess what? Rutherford B. Hayes became President of the United States by one vote. He became President of the United States. The deciding vote, incidentally, was cast by Florida. Just think about it. Every time you turn on your TV and you see these analyses of what's going on in this country, it always says it's about Florida, Florida, Florida. It's been about Florida for more than 100 years. And you know what? It's going to be about Florida this year as well. So this whole notion that my vote doesn't count, we got to get people to understand. You see, when the election gets thrown in the House of Representatives, everybody thinks that it's the 435 members of the House who will vote. That's not the way it goes. Under the law, each state will caucus among itself, and each state gets a chance to cast one vote. That's how it's done. This is the most consequential election in the history of the United States of America. Because if we fail this year, the clock gets turned back for 2 generations. I don't mean one. If we define generations by every 25 years, the clock will get turned back for 2 generations. And for you to say it can't happen, and I've had young people tell me, oh, that can't happen. Read your history. It did happen. And I used to teach this stuff. Anything that's happened before can happen again. And so I've been having meetings all over South Carolina with the Divine Nine. I've been having meetings all over South Carolina with all the faith groups, and I'm saying to them, every chapter ought to be adopting precincts. We can't tell who you vote for, but we sure enough can tell whether or not you voted. And when I look and see the people who knock on my door, the people who come to my office, and when I check Vote Builder and can see highly intelligent people, only 27% of the school teachers in the precinct next to mine bothered to vote. I'm not making this up. There's something wrong with that. There's an old book that some of you have written called Miseducation of the Negro. There's a miseducation taking place. Just because you drive in a fine automobile or you live in the suburbs, let me tell you something. Study the history of Robert Smalls. He gained great wealth, served 10 years in the South Carolina State Legislature, served 10 years in the United States Congress, became one of the most wealthy people in the country. But when he died in 1915, he died with a broken heart because everything that he had gained was taken away by that 1895 Constitution. Everything that we have gained over the last several years can be taken away if we do not show up at the polls in this election day. And so I want to thank you, and I just don't want to raise myself, but I see the young people are coming in. We want to welcome them. My Lord. Say something to the young men. That's great. That's great. Thank you. I'm going to close by saying something to the young people who are just coming in. Well, let me say something to the Maker Brothers first. You all mentioned it. A lot of you know I met my wife in jail. Now, jail worked for us. I'm not asking any of you all to go to jail looking for a spouse. It worked pretty well for us. We just celebrated last June 24th, our 57th wedding anniversary. But you know, I always thought, I went through most of my life, the first 10 years of our marriage, after having met 18 months before we got married, and I always thought that was a chance meeting in that jail that day. We had been locked up, those of us who had demonstrated that day. There were too many people, and some of you may remember they filled up all the jails. They couldn't hold anybody else. The students who didn't get locked up went back to the campus, figured out a way to get into the dining room. I'm not going to say they broke in. They kind of figured out a creative way to get into the dining room, and they were bringing us food. So this little 92-pounder walked toward me with a hamburger in her hands. I reached for her. She pulled it back and broke it in half. She ate half, gave me the other half. I was so grateful for that half hamburger. I married her 18 months later. Now, I always thought that was a chance until we were celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary. We were celebrating down in Charleston where we lived at the time, and all our friends, some of the jailbirds from 1960, had come down to Charleston to help us celebrate. We went out to dinner. After dinner, we were in our house. All the ladies were sitting around the dining room table. The guys were down in the rec room. And I was saying to them, I said, guys, we really made some real fine choices for spouses. We have done so well. And all of a sudden, it was quiet. Nobody was saying anything. I looked, and there was Emily, my wife, standing in the door. And she looked at me, and she said, that's what you think. I said, what do you mean what I think? That is how we met. And then she told me the rest of the story. It seemed that one day she and her roommate were standing in her dormitory window, looking out across the campus, and I was walking across the campus with the young lady I was dating at the time. She told her roommate, they do not make a good couple. That's right. That's right. He is going to be my husband. And she laid out her plan. So guys, you may think you're making the choices, but oftentimes you're being reined in. I found out on my 10th wedding anniversary that she had been stalking me for months, and I didn't know. And so I want to say to you guys, pay attention to them. I got 3 daughters, so I know. Let me say something to the young people who just came in as I close and yield to my good friend Hank. I first ran for office in 1970. I was declared the winner at 10 o'clock in the evening. About 3 o'clock in the morning, someone rang my doorbell. It was a TV reporter. Told me I better get down to the courthouse. I went down to the courthouse, and sure enough, I had been counted out. I thought I had won by 500 votes. They told me somebody forgot to carry a 1, and I had lost by 500 votes. I was very hurt. Next morning, a reporter called me, asked me what happened. I said to the reporter, I didn't get enough votes. She said to me, Clyburn, you know what everybody's saying. What do you think really happened? I said, whatever happened, I just didn't get enough votes. The next day, this was Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, the headline in the local paper was, in quotes, I didn't get enough votes. The gentleman who was elected governor on that day that I was getting counted out, John Carl West, saw that headline and called me and says, I will not leave the wounded on the battlefield. Come and join my staff. And the rest is history. So I want to say to the young people, everything that you feel does not have to be expressed. I want to say that. Just because you feel that you've been done wrong, You don't have to always express it. Your expressions are what gets recorded, not your feelings. Sometimes it's best to keep your feelings to yourself to make sure your expressions don't get recorded. Finally, I ran again in 1978, and I lost. Ran for Secretary of State, statewide. I ran again in 1986, and I lost. And a friend of mine said to me, "What are you going to do now? You just lost the third time. You know what they say, 3 strikes and you're out." What I said to my friend, that's a baseball rule. And nobody should live their lives by baseball rules. So let me say to you young people, no matter how many times you make an attempt, you keep trying until you get it done. Your parents and your grandparents taught you, if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. They didn't teach you to try 1 more time, 2 more times, or 3 more times. Try and try again. These lights, we give Thomas Edison credit for these lights. The fact of the matter is, we don't know how many times Thomas Edison failed. We do know this. He never got it right. That's history. He never got it right. He went up to Boston for a man named Lewis Latimer, a former slave. And he said to Lewis Latimer, "I understand you have discovered something called a filament. I got this light bulb. I can't keep it burning. I believe if I get my light bulb and your filament, bring them together, we can light the world." And that's what he did. He didn't care that Lewis Latimer was a son of slaves. What he cared about was whether or not he would be able to light the world. So today, the world is lit because a white guy named Thomas Edison and a black guy named Lewis Latimer got together. So young people, don't let these obstacles discourage you. You keep doing it. You keep studying. You keep working. Somebody will see it. Somebody will see the headline. Say, "Come join me." Somebody will see the result of your work. Say, "Come join me." And together, you can make a tremendous success and make this world a better place. Godspeed.
Quick time check. Our NAACP representative, who's our panelist, has to leave in about 20 minutes. So we have remarks from Congressman Hank Johnson, and then we have greetings remarks from our Grand Bosselist, and then we'll have. And then, okay. Thank you, Brother Grand. Can we please receive Congressman Hank Johnson?
Please be seated, everyone. Please be seated. Thank you all for being here today at this very important and crucial moment in the nation's history, where the battle is for the soul of the nation, the very soul of the nation. And of course, you all know that a person has a soul, but the person departs this earth at some point. And but the soul goes somewhere. The soul remains. Am I right about that? Yes. And so many have come and gone before us. You could call it the collective soul of the nation, which is the product of all of the living of those who have come before us. The collective soul, it is that soul that is under attack. whether or not it will survive this current challenge to it or not depends on us. And I'm reminded of a quote. Well, I'm reminded of something that was said by a Jewish scholar and sage. His name was Hillel the Wise. He died 10 years before Jesus Christ was born. This is Jewish history, but he said two things that I want to talk with you about briefly this morning. One is that if I am not for myself, then who is with me? If I am not for myself, then who is with me, or who is for me? And the other thing he said that is impressive to me for this purpose today is, if not now, then when? If not now, when? So we have, even though we have elected our first African-American president in this country, and we have so many African-American men who are doing such great things in our society, such as you all, we still have some things about us that we must heed to. We wake up in the morning, all of us, to reports of how many young black men, and sometimes older, were killed last night. How many were shot, and how many got arrested? How many young men got arrested? It's epidemic proportions where our young people fear whether or not they should go to school or not, or what happens on the walk home. Our young people are living in fear. Now, we can blame it on them, or we can take responsibility for them ourselves. I believe that that is what Pastor Jasper Williams was talking about at the eulogy at Aretha's funeral. I believe that he was not talking down on the ladies about you not being able to raise young men to be young men. I think he was challenging the men. He was speaking to the men, and he was taking that opportunity to speak to the living among us. He was taking that opportunity to say that we have to start loving ourselves, and if we don't respect ourselves first, then you can't love. How can you love and you don't even respect yourself? So respect yourself. And once you respect yourself, then a lot follows from there. I think it's important that we understand that concept and that we seize the moment, which is now, which is to use this election as an opportunity to uplift our race, our people, which means that all of us who are eligible to do so, we need to get out and vote. And we don't need to just do that. We need to be a part of the effort to go out and get other black men to vote, because these women, these black women, take care of their business, fellas. When it comes down to the polls, you go ask Senator Doug Jones of Alabama who it was that pulled him across the finish line. It was those black women, and I was down there. I saw it and I felt it. What I really want to see and feel is a similar movement among us, men, to get out other men, because we silo ourselves. We're too busy competing with each other, wanting to be the strongest, the biggest, the baddest, the richest, the most powerful. And so we compete with each other, but we need to come together to work for the common good. It's time. If not now, then when? And if you're not for yourself, then who is for you? So having said that, ladies and gentlemen, y'all been listening quite a lot. I know the panel is ready to get started. Bachelors, y'all have a tremendous event today. Thank you for your appearance here in Washington, D.C. Just your appearance here is so encouraging. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Brother Congressman Johnson. Now I want to bring up our first panelist. Jamal Watkins from NAACP. He's the vice president, as I mentioned, for civic engagement. Can you please share with us the great work that you're doing at the NAACP? How do we get black men, fathers involved? What are the issues that are being raised? How do we also get the concerns of black men recognized by some of these people that are running for office?
Thank you, Brother Boone. Good morning. Good morning. Now, it is exciting to be in this space. I want to thank the leadership of Congressman Clyburn and Congressman Johnson, not only for their leadership in this space, but their leadership nationally as a part of the Congressional Black Caucus. My name is Jamal Watkins, and I proudly serve as the Vice President of Civic Engagement for the NAACP. And folks are probably wondering, why does he have to rush off? It's because we are now, I believe, 54 days out from this election cycle, and literally across the street, we're trying to raise a little bit more money to put in communities like Florida. And so we got some money meetings that I got to run off to. But before I run off, I wanted to make sure that I brought you greetings on behalf of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, our chair, Leon Russell, our president and CEO, Derek Johnson. I want to thank your Grand Basilisk, Dr. Marion, who has started a partnership with us and really said that we have to stand shoulder to shoulder in order to get this thing right and in order to bring home the types of wins that we need to see on November 6th. I also want to take a point of personal privilege. Leader Knox, my general president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated would be upset with me if I didn't recognize your leadership and your friendship as we stand shoulder to shoulder with the men of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Now, I have three things I wanted to share with you all, and I hope it will sort of elevate the conversation around how we rally black fathers and men to the poll. How many of you have used the Voter Action Network? I see 2 hands. Okay, so there's 3 hands, 4 hands, the VAN. So we have a thing called the VAN system. It was started around 2003, 2004, where folks got together and said, let's pull together voter data so that we can know exactly who's voting, where they're voting, how they're voting, what it looks like. And that data, as you heard from Congressman Clyburn, is a way in which he can go and see, heck, only 27 or 24% of folks in my neighborhood actually voted. That VAN system is something that the NAACP has access to in all 50 states, and in partnership with the National Panhellenic and the men of Omega Psi Phi, everyone in this room technically has access to the VAN system in order to check to see who exactly is voting and not voting in your community. Now, why is that important? It's because when we think about the next 50-plus days, it's about identifying what we call the infrequent voter. The voter that sometimes shows up and maybe have voted for President Barack Obama once or twice, but never voted any other time. That means they ignored their mayoral races, they've ignored midterm races, but they're registered to vote. Now you may think, oh, is that really important? But in the state of Florida alone, there is 973,000 black registered voters who are projected not, N-O-T, not to participate in this election cycle. So if Andrew Gillum has a chance of winning, there's about 973,000 people who look just like you and I, who if we knock on their doors, if we send them a text message, if we go after them and turn them out, and I'm not talking about all of them, just about 3 to 5% of them, he becomes the next governor of the great state of Florida. When you hear the name like Stacey Abrams and you look in the VAN system, there's about 700,000 black folks who are registered to vote in Georgia who are infrequent voters, meaning they're probably not going to vote unless you and I, somebody in their community, knocks on their door, sends them a text message, sends them a piece of mail, hits them up on Facebook and says, hey, I need you to turn out. And so when we think about this state by state, there are millions of folks who look like you and I who simply are not participating. But if they did, the game would be changed, the system would be changed, and we would have different victories in our communities. And so if you haven't played in the VAN system, don't know what it is, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Before you leave this city, make sure that you talk to whatever organization you're a part of and ask the question, who is connecting us with the Voter Action Network, the VAN? And if you don't have access, then you can actually say, well, we need to get with the NAACP because they're giving it away for free. And I'm saying that again, we're giving it away for free. That's why I got to run across the street and raise some money, because it costs. But at the end of the day, that system is a game changer. So the second thing I want to lift up is the notion of partnerships. And so when we think about the work that we're doing, the NAACP decided a few months ago under the leadership of President Johnson that we needed to wrangle as many folks as possible to identify our seats of power. And what I mean by that is we started a thing called GIS mapping. And we just did the maps for anybody a part of a Baptist Convention church, go to a Baptist church. There is 12,000 plus Baptist Convention churches in this country, and we just mapped out with them exactly where their churches are located relative to their state senate, state house, congressional districts, and that way we can actually identify how many folks should that church be trying to register to vote, how many folks that church should be trying to turn out to vote. And we actually have the ability to do the same for Greek letter organizations, the Divine Nine, and other denominations. And so we are on a steady drumbeat the next couple of weeks to map your infrastructure. Because a lot of times you hear folks say, you know, we don't have this and we don't have that, but the one thing we have that the Koch brothers don't have are people who are dedicated and committed, who are volunteering and serving and working. And if we map that out and figure out how to invest in those people, then our power actually shifts. And so that second thing I wanted to talk about is the notion of mapping your infrastructure. And if you haven't already done that, again, the NAACP is willing and ready to stand with you in order to provide that service for free. And then the last thing I want to talk about and lift up is the notion of what does it mean to rally black men and black fathers in our communities. And I think it's very simple. Everybody in this room wants to live a good life, right? We all want to provide for our families, take care of ourselves, not have to worry and struggle to pay our bills. When you think about black men in city by city, state by state, it's the same narrative and the same story. But there's a disconnect because sometimes the politicians and the folks who get elected aren't actually speaking the language that says, I'm here to work for you and I'm here to make your life better. So for us in our communities, we have to root ourselves in an agenda that is literally lifting up how this connects to making your life better. And I say that because if you're anybody from the great state of Louisiana, I'm gonna pick on Louisiana for a minute and then I'll wrap. You know, the former governor there, Bobby Jindal, refused to take money from Medicaid expansion for his state, which would have given expanded Medicaid services for about 300,000 folks. And the majority of those folks were white people. But the black folks in that state also were suffering. That same governor, he refused to take money from the federal government to expand broadband service. You know, if you don't have access to the internet, you're missing out on information, economic opportunities, jobs. We have to remind our folks that a bad governor like that is literally taking health care away from you, taking access to good jobs away from you. And so when we think about folks like Stacey Abrams, folks like Andrew Gillum, folks like Ayanna Pressley in Massachusetts, Lucy McBath in Georgia, when we think about Mike Epstein in Mississippi, if we don't get behind candidates who are going to make our lives better, then we actually are missing the opportunity to own a piece of our power. And so when I think about black men in particular, how do we carry that message that it's not about the elected officials, but it's about empowering yourself to make your lives better? And so before you all leave here, like I say, there are three things I want you to keep in mind. One is making sure that you and your organization is connected to the VAN system, and there are many ways to do that, and the NAACP wants to partner. The second is to make sure that you actually are knowing and mapping your seat of power. What does your infrastructure look like in North Carolina, in Florida, in Georgia? Who do you have? Because that will dictate the type of investments that should be made. And the third is making sure that we continue to carry the message that it's not about the politician, but it's about bettering our families, bettering our lives, and driving a winning agenda. And I know that the fellow panelists will actually dig into some of those nuances, but I wanted to make sure, in the absence of Ben Crump, who's been affected by the weather, you know, that we actually lifted up the fact that we have some things and some tools that are going to make this election better for the communities we serve and reclaim our communities block by block, city by city. Thank you very much.
We'll just take two quick questions for Brother Watkins before he leaves. I know you had one.
Yes, sir.
Is there a plan in place for those of us who have to vote by absentee ballot to make sure our vote actually counts?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is that in different states, there are different rules around vote by mail or absentee balloting. So for example, in Florida, and I'm picking on Florida because we've been spending time with Andrew and his team in particular, they have a thing called vote by mail. You don't have to have an excuse in order to vote by mail. You just have to request a ballot. In some other states, you have to actually ask for permission to vote by mail through an absentee process. So what I would encourage you all to do is think through in your state, what are the rules? And if you know the rules, how do you communicate that out to your chapters, your friends, your family, so that if folks who are in the military, for example, or folks who travel, college students who are, at a school somewhere else, they can vote by mail, if you will, but it depends on the rules of the state. And so it's really just getting that information out as much as possible.
Thank you, Juwan.
All right, thank you all.
Next, we have Minister Kirsten John Ford. If you can share the great work of the National Action Network, your leadership, Reverend Sharpton leadership around voter mobilization, registration, and how does voting connect to some of the most pressing civil rights issues, and then how do we get black men and fathers involved in civil rights and mobilization and activism in our communities?
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. First, let me thank you for your leadership, Grand Bachelors, both current and past, all of the members. I bring greetings from Reverend Sharpton and your brothers and sisters in the National Action Network and the Civil Rights Movement. We have, for 150 years, been fighting the Civil War. We've been fighting it in multiple stages. The violent phase of the Civil War has been ended for over 100 years, but the philosophical struggles have not gone away. They have shifted from violence to the political system, but the intent and the purpose of the opposition is the same. That is to maintain power, to maintain their lifestyle, their way of life at the expense of other people. What we need to do in order to capitalize off of the historic moment that we are in is understand the historic context in which we're in. First and foremost, Trump is not the first wicked king we have seen in this country. We've seen wicked kings before. We've defeated wicked systems before. So the first thing we've got to do is destroy the facade of the inevitability of our defeat. It is not inevitable that our country is going to slide back. It is not inevitable that the worst is going to happen. It is not inevitable. It is not written in stone that the 1% is going to determine the destiny of the rest of the 99%. What is inevitable is that the outcomes will be determined by our actions. The only thing that is inevitable is that whatever we expect to happen is going to be tied by what we invest in that expectation. And so what we need to do in the context of this historic moment is understand what our investment has been thus far in this nation and what it needs to be at this moment to reclaim our investment. Black men, we have done more to build the United States of America into the most powerful nation in the history of the world than any other people. We have done it off the backs of our labor. We have been the most hated population in this nation, structurally put at a structural deficiency, and it is all because of the fear of our power. So first and foremost, we have got to reclaim our investment. This is our nation. We built it. We're not going to let others take it back from us. That's the first declaration we need to make. Then we need to understand what has been done systemically and psychologically to prevent us from arising and reclaiming. first and foremost, we need to understand the connection between the political system and the criminal justice system. There is a direct link and correlation between our interaction in the criminal justice system and our interaction in the political system. The criminal justice system is used to defraud us and to disempower us and disenfranchise us politically. So we get locked up, not just so that we can fill up jails, not just so that we can keep the prison industrial complex alive and well. We get locked up so that they can prevent us from empowering future generations by stripping us of our rights to vote, by making sure that the communities that we come from don't receive the federal dollars that they should receive through census apportionment, because most of our men are somewhere else. They're not being counted in the communities from which they come. They're being counted in communities that house them, but the community at large doesn't look like them. So the federal dollars that should be going to Bed-Stuy, Compton, Chicago, other urban centers where we make up the majority of the population or plurality of the population, the money we should be getting from the federal government is now going to rural areas that warehouse us in their prisons. So we are not just there to fund and provide low-cost labor. We're also in those warehouses to provide federal subsidies for the communities in which those prisons exist. So we need to understand the direct connection between the criminal justice system and the political system. Parolees in New York State have finally been restored the right to vote as the result of a protracted struggle and negotiation with a Democrat governor who has decided through executive order to restore parolee right to vote. One of our priorities has got to be the restoration of the right to vote to the millions of black males and females whose rights have been stripped of them because of their interaction with the criminal justice system. Nextly, we need to understand there is no such thing as an off-year election. With all due respect to all of those who have been in this and who refer to this as an off-year election, every year is a presidential election. Presidents are selected by a dual system, a popular vote and electoral college. We do not speak enough about the electoral college. We have, in the last 20 years, gotten 2 presidents, 2, as a result of the electoral college. So to ignore it is to our peril and our detriment. The electoral college is also a function of slavery and disempowering communities of color. It was a hedge against the political popular power represented by northern states to protect the southern states against the political influence and the overwhelming populations of the North. What we've got to do is deal with the Electoral College. The Electoral College is selected on the local level. So when you vote for your local legislator, you're voting for somebody that's going to select the elector. So there is no off-year election. There are only popular vote years and there are electoral vote years. So we've got to get out of this mentality that every 4 years we're voting for president. No, you're voting for president every time you go to the polls. The question is, which track are you voting in? The electoral track to make sure that those who select the electors represent us, or are we voting in the popular track every 4 years? We've got to break the psychology that has us bound and disconnects us from the real way the system works. The system does not just work based on our emotions, whether we feel like going to vote every 4 years or not. It works whether we vote or not. If we don't vote, it works against our interests. When we do vote, we can move it to work for our interests. Finally, I would close by saying this. If we do not capitalize off of those opportunities we have, and everyone's going to talk to the young people because that's cool to do and this, that, and the other thing, but those who are not registered to vote but can be registered to vote, those who are looking at this time and saying, this has nothing to do with me. What you need to understand is that America, for the first time in her history, is under the threat, the danger, the possibility of giving you less than our parents gave us. So the America you see and you know is not the America that's going to be here 10 years from now if you don't get involved today. The face of this nation will be different. The type of nation we live in will be different. It will not be a democracy that you or I can recognize if we don't capitalize off of this moment. So while you're tweeting, and while you're posting, and while you're gramming, and while you're DMing, and while you're running around being Gucci fly, you need to recognize the fact that all of that is fleeting and can be taken away because the American democracy is not a promise. The American democracy is the result of deliberate labor, deliberate, purposeful intention. And if you want to see America disappear as a democracy, then all you've got to do is nothing. But if you want to ensure that you have the promises that we have and enjoy the country that, to see the country that you live in exist and prosper tomorrow, then you got to get off the phone and talk to your people and move them into the polls. Break the psychology of being disempowered. This is your nation. They're trying to take it from you. We're not taking it back from them. They are trying to take it back from you. And anybody that comes into your house to take the things that belong to you, you've got to have enough sense to stand up, defend it, and push back against that, because that's what's happening in America today. Thank you.
Ms. Deborah Frazier.
Good morning. These guys are a hard act to follow. I'm going to tell you briefly about Healthy Start, because I don't think many of you know Healthy Start. You may know NAACP and Al Sharpton, but I'll tell you briefly. Healthy Start is a national program. It's been around since 1991 under the vision and guidance of Louis Sullivan. And our goal and mission is to reduce the health disparities in birth outcomes. And you can't have a birth outcome unless you have a daddy. So one of the things that we learned early on in Healthy Start was that we had to involve fathers. So our mission in the early days of Healthy Start, our program started involving fathers, and the National Healthy Start Association started a fatherhood program that listened to daddies and listened to our programs around the country. And we evolved a life course program that looked at fathers and men and boys. So we started with the pregnancy of the mom, and we work across 39 states in this country, and we work best when we work in partnership. And one of our key partners has been the Omegas for the last 3 years. And I want to say that across these 39 states and 100 programs, across this country, let me say that we have high disparities in infant mortality and maternal deaths. But where we have Healthy Starts, we have few infant deaths and very few maternal deaths. And it's because of the work that Healthy Start does in identifying pregnant women and keeping them in care and working with dads and the work that dads do. I want to talk a little bit about the key work of Healthy Starts, because what we do is to work totally with men and boys at the community level and at the national level. At the community level, we have community action networks, and I wanted to speak directly to the Omegas and other organizations about being engaged with us at the community level, and then with national organizations about what you can do with us at the national level. And Brother Fairchild was with us, and the Omegas were with us this past spring to talk about Brother, You're on My Mind, and some of the other work that the Omegas are doing. And I want to talk about disparities a little bit and follow up on what the two previous speakers said and make this make sense for you. When he talked about Governor Jindal in Mississippi, I'm sorry, in Louisiana, and I want to talk about Texas, because 3 years ago, I was here at the Health Brain Trust, and I mentioned maternal deaths in this country. And Mayor Bowser had 3 or 4, 5 mayors here from key cities talking about maternal deaths and the disparities in maternal deaths. In New York, you have black women dying at 12 times the rate of white women in this country. And that's deplorable. But we talked about that 3 or 4 years ago. And I mentioned Texas at that time because Texas had more black women dying than third world countries. And that's deplorable, but you know why? Because the Texas legislature decided it was not going to fund Planned Parenthood, it was not going to accept Obamacare, as they called it, and it was not going to expand Medicaid. And you know what could fix that? Voting. Electing state officials who were sensitive to the needs of poor people. That's what voting can do. So when we talk about health disparities, when we talk about the health care of people of color, when we talk about black women dying, when we talk about black children not having access to health care, when we talk about infants dying, in many ways, the White House matters, but what happens in your own communities matter.
Mm-hmm.
What these two previous speakers said, that's the bottom line. You don't have to wait every 4 years. We were all thrilled to have Mr. Obama in the White House for 2 terms. But you know what? What the guy in the White House can do, he can do, but what happens in the House and the Senate is important too. If we send the right folks to the House and the Senate, he can't put folks in the Supreme Court. He can't pass some of that crap that he wants to pass. I was trying to find a more appropriate word, but it didn't come out that way.
Want me to use it for you?
I was trying to be respectful to the Reverend here, and to the Omegas, and to my parents, and my children, and my grandchildren. So it's important that you get out to vote. It's important that some of us put our money, because we have it, behind the candidates in our own communities and behind the candidates in Florida and in Atlanta. I work here in D.C. I vote back in Little Rock. But I put money in everybody's election where I want to see them elected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I left the Lynx Legislative Luncheon yesterday. You were there, Dr. Myers. And the Lynx have this thing now. It's all about your voice, your power, your vote.
Mm-hmm.
If the Lynx are doing it, if the Omegas are doing it, if the NAACP is doing it, my goodness, what a difference we can make. We can turn this country around and transform it.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to my Healthy Starts, I send them to the Hill to work on legislation, to vote on, to get Congress to vote on bills that work, that keep Healthy Start funded. But some of them say, I can't do it because I'm a state health department, I'm a city health department. Some of my really good folks say, I'll do it on Saturday, doesn't matter. But we have to depend on community action networks to really do the work of getting the right people in Congress. We have no excuse, and I want to say this, I cleaned out my parents' house. They live in Mississippi, and they're both deceased. When I cleaned out their house, I found receipts from poll taxes. How far we've come, but have we? We have so much further we can go. I was also proud to find letters from Southern Christian Leadership Foundation. Southern Christian Leadership, because my mother had taken it upon herself to train women in the community to get jobs because she found out about the new jobs program from Lyndon Johnson. We can all do, she wasn't part of anything. As she said, I was home raising my 9 kids, but I thought somebody should be doing something. Do something. And getting the vote out is the least you can do. Do it in your church, do it in your organization. Health disparities depends on it. I work in the area of health disparities. Most of the health disparities has to do with policies that are absolutely corrupt. I am doing fatherhood training in Louisiana in about 2 weeks. We are refocusing fatherhood training to include the health of men who are coming out of prison, because Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in the country, or it did until Oklahoma just exceeded them. So we're doing fatherhood training in prisons and helping fathers to reintegrate. But these fathers also need lots of other help. We're taking our fatherhood training and telling dads, by the way, the expulsion rate for preschoolers and preschoolers of color is also out the roof. Your brown children make up 13% of the preschoolers, but 48% of the expulsions. So you're talking about the prison pipeline, they're being put out of school in preschool. They're already being told that they have no value in preschool. Something is wrong. And we need legislation, and we can thank Danny Davis for getting on that one on the preschool expulsion. We need to make sure that we are at the polls to get people elected, like Mr. Clyburn, like Danny Davis, like Cory Booker, like all of those folks who have your backs, and do so at the local level. Because if you don't, we'll continue to whine and cry about all the things that are wrong and doing nothing about it. And with that, I'm ready to be in partnership with the Omegas, and I am in partnership with the NAACP and my sister Lynx. Thank you.
How good and how pleasant it is for us brothers, and I must add our sisters as well, to dwell together in unity. And unity is that key piece. You know, that's what it takes for all of us to move our country and our communities forward. It takes that strong grasp of us understanding what we must do together. Now, you know, I've heard a lot on the panel so far in regards to some of these stark numbers, and I thought it only really affected us in Maryland when you see that small turnout of voters actually showing up to the polls. In my district alone, I got 117,000 people, only 10,000 people show up to vote. And it's one of the most educated African-American communities in the country in Prince George's County, right here next to Washington, D.C. And those numbers always mess with me because I know we can do so much more. And we got a lot of issues that are affecting us, but a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention to how we can actually fix it. You know, I hear about the rates you were saying with the preschoolers being expelled. That's at the school board level, and that is at a local election level. A lot of people look to the federal elections with the president and the Senate, but they forget about that local level. They forget about the mayors and the roads that they must fix. They forget about the state budgets that the governors have to approve and that your state legislators and your state senators have to vote on to make sure that we get the resources that we need in our communities. It's a lot of issues that affect us, but it all happens at the state and local level where we really can make the biggest and best impact on all of our people in our communities. In regards to bringing our fathers out, you know, across the state, you know, you end up seeing a lot of times that fathers are not actually in the homes. And so I was so happy when Brother Knox pulled together the Fatherhood Initiative because it shed a light on how we can truly make an impact to make sure dads are really engaged in their children's lives. Brother Tabiti Boone, you know, he's actually come down to Annapolis, and we've testified on making sure that fathers have equal access to their children. But these are bills that get killed in Annapolis every single year for the last 10 years where shared custody is not something that is of a norm. There has been, the Washington Post did an article recently talking about all of the states that are trying to make sure shared custody is something that we can do collectively, but what's happening is only 20 states, actually 10 states, I'm sorry, actually have shared custody provisions right now. In Maryland, we're gonna push this again when I get to Annapolis in January. There's no telling what'll happen, but that's what we have to start to make sure we touch our kids early. Being weekend fathers is a thing of the past. We need to make sure these dads are in their children's lives on a very consistent basis. Doing homework with your kids should not be on the weekends. It should be every single day. Taking your kids to the polls to vote. How many people in here have actually taken their children to the polls to vote with them? That's good. We need to see more hands. And if you're not taking your children, take your neighbors. Take your neighbors' kids. How many people in here actually voted in the last election so far? You do know that the NAACP mentioned about the voter access network, so we can check that, right? but that is a very, it's one of the things I learned as I've knocked over 10,000 doors. This was a very hard race that I had this past election, and I knocked over 10,000 doors to make sure we touched as many people as possible. And now that we have been jealous at the forefront in our state, we have to continue to reduplicate that effort to make sure that we drive up the numbers to make sure this brother can get in and do some of the wonderful work that's going to impact us here in the state of Maryland. When we talk about health care for all, you know, we got a lot of folks within the state of Maryland who don't have access to health care. When you look at how much the state is paying out for Medicare and Medicaid, it's pennies on a dollar. So what that means is that our healthcare providers don't get necessarily what they need. So when you go into our doctor's offices in our community, you see there's antiquated equipment in there because they don't have enough resource to actually have what they need to make sure that we have a 21st century healthcare facility. Thankfully, in Prince George's County right now, we actually have a county executive that's pushing to make sure we have a new national, regional healthcare center with the University of Maryland Healthcare Center. Those things only happen when you have folks that are coming together knowing that what we do collectively as elected officials and as a community can truly move us forward in the best direction possible. So I ask everybody in here today, and I'm leaving you with a charge. When you get home, the day of elections, go to your neighbors, 5 doors to the left and 5 doors to the right, and bring your neighbors with you to the polls to vote. Bring them. Because it's going to take all of us to make sure that we make the positive change that we want to see in our communities. You know, it's going to take all of us. So I want to thank you all of you brothers, all of you sisters that showed up, all of you, the youth in the back. It's definitely, you know, we're taking the football right now and is running as fast as we can so we can make sure we pass it off to you all. Because you all will continue to move it forward for the following generation. So thank you all for showing up. I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Charles. In this order, we're going to have a good friend of mine, Reverend William Coleman, out of Trenton, New Jersey, one of our country's most esteemed theologians, activists, pastors across this country. His wife is the congressional representative here in Congress from the city of Trenton, state of New Jersey. And I've asked him to come and just share, how do we connect the faith-based community, the clergy, men's ministries, and the church around how do we engage men in terms of voter registration, dealing with men issues, political issues, and concerns, and how do we use the church like we used to do back in the 60s and early days. The church was the hub around a lot of our activism and organizing, registering people to vote. So, Brother Coleman, can you just share how do we engage the church? What is the role of the church in terms of helping to mobilize and get our men involved in terms of voting and also just getting our men back involved with church?
Good morning. It's kind of interesting. I'm sitting listening, and let me just bow to the Omegas. I'm not a letter person, but I belong to the oldest fraternity. I am a Prince Hall Mason. I just thought I'd lay that out there. But let me be clear. I don't care what fraternity you belong to. We're brothers trying to lift up our community. There's a history of us meeting at the churches for strength, for courage, for prayer, coming together. I don't care if you're Muslim, I don't care if you're Protestant, Catholic, we need to come together. And when I think about the position the Lord has placed me in, let me be clear that my wife puts a muzzle on me every day when I go out. She's a member of Congress, and she reminds me every day that she's the congresswoman and not me. Because down here in D.C., I march, I protest. I'm out there with my sneakers on, my hat turned backward, and I get rid of this bow tie, trying to be uppity, looking like no. Get out there on the street corner and talk to folks and listen to folks and pull everyone in. And I made a note here about how we separate ourselves from others because we worked hard to pull ourselves up, but somewhere along the way, we forgot to bring anybody with us. I'm not mad at you because you got our little button on and we're sitting up there, I'm this. And well, let me tell you, if you don't know Christ, when Jesus walked, he said, come walk with me. And he pulled everyone along with him. Some of the most rowdiest people you ever want to know follow Jesus. So why are we rejecting those brothers who are coming back as returning citizens? Why are we rejecting a person because they don't have a job? Why are we rejecting them because their underwear is showing them? Get to know them and then tell them to pull up their pants. But we seem to sit back and go like, yeah, it's us. No, it's all of us. Not some of us. Not those of you who live in these gated communities thinking you've arrived, and now you want all of a sudden, we have a 2018 election. Well, let's go back and kind of work this a little bit. Let's go back and get to know people. In Trenton, New Jersey, no one gets elected without coming through our church. I don't care if you're white, black, green, gray, you don't get elected unless you come through our church because we worked it that way. Every church I've pastored, I've pastored 3. Every church I've pastored, I build the community from the inside out. I invite white, Latino, come to our church, but you're not going to stand in my pulpit and tell me how to run my church. You come and work with us. I want you to bring your money. I want you to help me build a community, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, provide shelter for the homeless. But you don't tell me because I already know. We've fallen into the trap of letting the man tell us what to do. We're intelligent. We've gone to school. In a church, it's more than yelling and screaming on Sunday morning. It's about helping and uplifting and strengthening. And I'm saying to you now, we need to bring them all in. We need to spend time out there getting them to register to vote, to talk about returning citizens instead of ex-offenders, because many of them are there because of the conspiracy. I forgot to tell you, I'm also a retired New York City policeman. I know what I'm talking about. But God sent me to the pulpit to talk to folk about how we lift up a community that's being forced, pushed out, left out, shut out. We've fallen for the lie that we can't make it. I work with the Panhellenic Council. I love what they do. I try to bring everyone together so that we register people to vote, but more importantly, we help feed them. We help get them jobs. We help them to learn how, amazingly, that there are 40-year-old brothers who can't read or write because they got locked up at age 14, sent to prison, came out, and we didn't want to talk to them because he has a record. Well, Turn around and look at each other. There's no one in here. Don't have somebody in your family who've either gone to jail, had a problem, or set up and sent to prison. So let us be clear about this faith-based group we should be talking about, and stop talking about, yo, if one more person called me doctor, yeah, doc, how you doing? I don't have a doctorate degree. Why are we talking? You have 200 people in your congregation, and you're not trying to help anybody, nobody but yourself. Churches need to get away from that. Stop being open on Sunday, but being open on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We need to be about that change, brothers. We need to uplift the brothers. And one of the things I like about my church is that right in back of us is the Prince Hall Lodge. So I'm always on the brothers. If we were to dress up in our black suits and our black bow ties and march shoulder to shoulder down the street in the country, city we live in, we would send the message that we want brothers to join us and not have them go join a gang. The reason why so many people join gangs is they want to belong. That's all. Well, let's create an atmosphere where they can belong, where they can work with us, where we can help expunge their records to get them jobs, where we can go. The good news is that we should set up blocks so that anyone running for office knows that they must come to talk to us if they want to get elected. I don't care what color they are. I like the idea that I can call the governor. Yes, I can. Well, it's because my wife knows the governor, but I can call the governor. But I also help the first lady who's and work with cervical cancer screenings and those kinds of things that help build our community. It's not just by going to the polls for 2018. Let's start building back here, getting jobs and working with them and feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and providing shelter for the homeless. We need to be about that. We can't go to work every day and just say, I'm going to help myself. It's not about you. It's about us. Be clear. Jeff Sessions is trying to wipe us out. Be clear about it. We have a sociopath/psychopath in the White House. Be clear about that. Trying to take us back to the 50s if you want to go. I don't want to go back there. But what I want to do is for all of us to step up and say, bring somebody with us. Engage a brother on the street instead of turning away when we see him coming, just because we can afford 3 suits. Give up one of them. You can only wear one at a time. So let us stop talking about the small picture and talk about the big picture and the long term, that what a minister, a real called pastor can do in the faith-based community. Not about just preaching and screaming, but about teaching and embracing and learning. I spent a lot of time calling people at my church, and I'm just an associate there. My pastor said, what do you want to do? I just want to be a servant. I don't need to be in the pulpit. Let me be in the back helping you, getting you a seat, making sure you have food in your stomach. Then register you to vote, making sure your kids can get into school, making sure your children have something to wear where people won't be laughing at them, making sure you have a diet that so you won't be 400 pounds, can't walk, but I want you to live long. That's what churches should be doing. So when I talk about faith-based, let's talk about how we help our community. And 2018 is important for us. So let me be clear. Everybody up here is saying the same thing, but I need all of you to talk to each other. Amen? Amen. Can I get an amen? Amen? All right. Thank you.
Reverend Coleman, I got to correct you on that. It's not just the 50s. They want to take us further back than that. So time check. It's a little past 11. I think we can go to 11:20. There's an 11:30 session here. So we have Brother Wilson. We're going to do quick 10-minute Q&A, and then we want to close out with marching orders and a statement from our Grand Bosslers. Is that okay? Okay.
All right. Watch that clock. Okay, thank you, Brother Boone. Again, always giving honor to God and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who I know we must acknowledge him with this mission that we have before us. I come to bring you the good news, my brothers. We are putting things into action so that we can defeat the system that's going to be facing us in November. Fatherhood and Mentoring Initiative. I want to thank Graham Boston for appointing me as chairman. I also thank Brother Tony Knox for his leadership. I just want to kind of give you an overview of some of the things we are doing on fatherhood and mentoring over this past 9 years when we joined partnership with President Obama, and we'll continue our legacy. Basically, on the fatherhood, we have 4 basic tenets that we have been working on throughout the country, and I'll show you those brothers who are working in it. We need your help with that partnership relationship that we established with the various organizations that have been before here today. We're trying to take these down to the lower level, as well as public awareness, even legislation. When we go through our days on the Capitol, we want to take this message to our legislators as they make decisions, and also to uplift the image of fathers. There are a lot of men who are taking care of their children, and they need to be recognized for that. So we don't ensure that that happens. A new initiative we're undertaking, Project Manhood, while we do a lot of mentoring. New Graham Boston has decided that we're gonna, in every chapter throughout the world, is gonna have a youth mentoring program. So brothers, I'm charging you today, we got homework to do. Your district chairpersons are gonna be contacting you, providing you the information on the 4 basic tenets. As you see, a leadership, academic achievement, character building, being leaders in the family and schools, be like the young men that you see here today. We're going to be trying to have throughout the world mentoring programs similar that you have at your school. Also, financial literacy and public service. These are the tenets that our program will be working under. And our call to action, brothers, and our partners. Voter registration, we've been talking about today. All of you all have seen this card here. It's very important. We want men, we're asking 100,000 men to pledge to take their sons, grandsons, or mentees to the poll with them. They need to see this and understand the importance of voting. We're talking about making a generational change, so they'll know the importance of voting locally, voting for the judges and the sheriffs. So if you don't have a son or a grandson, take the neighbor across the street from you. Grab one of the young men who are at your church and take them to the polls with you. And what we want you to do as well is take a selfie and send that information to our national headquarters, and we're gonna post it up as proof of what we're trying to do. These voting cards, you can get anyone to sign them out. The men that I'll show you up later, the district reps, they're gonna collect these from us. It's very simple. And you also go to our website and sign up. We're trying to get 100,000 men to pledge, my brothers. That means your brothers, your homeboys, the guys you hang out with, have them to go to our headquarters, to our polls, and sign up to commit to doing this. We have an outstanding program with our undergraduates, our Future Dads program. We're about to take this show on the road. I've already talked with Alabama State University. They want to host one of our youth conferences, which is going to feature our Future Dads program. I'm talking about the Second Vice Graham Boston is going to get our undergraduates involved in this initiative. And once we go to the capitals, brothers, the brothers who are in the political action arena, we need to have on our agenda there fatherhood and mentoring. When we do our Omega Days on the Capitol, not just a picture-taking session, but we have an agenda that we want to push. And also, we're going to increase awareness about mental health and also physical health and try to combat this crisis. And ultimately, brothers, we want to educate our male youth with life skill tools that will allow them to be successful and ultimately to be our replacement. So these are the charts. And here are some of the actual programs that our Fatherhood Initiative tackles, our Future Dads program, as well as racial injustice. Anytime there's some type of civic engagement that's needed, our Grand Bosselines have always made sure that we were out there fighting for others' rights. Brother Ben Crump, he's going to be one of our champions of this 100,000 Fathers Voters Pledge. Stop the violence is an issue that we're tackling. Domestic violence, gun control. These are actions that on the fatherhood and mentoring that we're going to be talking about throughout the fraternity. Again, brothers, cousins, uncles, we need to get men to the polls, but make sure that we take our young men with us. They need to see the importance of doing this. That's what everyone has asked you here today. I know you all know that this is important. So again, we already have our charge, and we're looking forward to making a difference in November. We cannot afford not to go to the polls, brothers. So again, our Fatherhood and Mentoring Initiative, these are our chairpersons. We are from Japan. We have a brother in our international committees in Japan, all the way to Boston. So we have someone that can dialogue and also talk with the various agents in all the regions of the country. Brother Keith Pemberton, he's going to be over Big Brothers Big Sisters. Brother Brother Keith Pemberton will be doing leadership conference, and Brother Ray Bell will be doing Big Brothers Big Sisters. And here are your district chairpersons, so and we'll make sure this information goes out and be placed on the website and send it out so that you know who your leaders are in your district. And bottom line, we need to take this message where the rubber meets the road down to the chapters. So we need your help, brothers, and we have our call to action, and we're looking forward to making a difference in November and as we mentor and change the lives in our community. Thank you very much.
So at this time, we have some questions from the floor. We want to entertain those questions for our panelists. They share some great information.
We need a mic. I don't see a Roman mic.
Do we have a floor mic?
Oh, there, right there.
Sir.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Many of you, I think at least 3 or 4 of you have touched on the issue of politics and the criminal justice system. An increasing number of states are adopting private prisons. And I was just wondering if we should be listening to those who seek our votes for their position on privatizing prisons. Is that an issue that we should be paying attention to?
Let me just say that, as you know, President Obama signed off against private prisons, and as soon as Donald Trump got into office, they reversed it. So private prison is not something we want to be involved in. It hurts our community. It's a setup. It's a conspiracy to use our labor to build countries all up and down the state. You go in the South, you will see people in orange jackets out working for $1.50 a day. It's slavery. So we should not be involved in it. We should be against it at all costs from where I sit and from every congressperson I've talked to. I have agreed. Yesterday we had a panel, and my wife's had a panel on criminal justice, and what we talked about was this very thing that you're saying, that we should not be involved. Private prisons, it's really hurting us. Private prisons is this mass incarceration. That's what it's all about. It's all about labor. It's all about when Sessions got in office, that's what he's been doing. His first week or 2 in office, he rolled back what President Obama had put in place, stopping private prisons.
Dr. Myers and then Frank Malone.
Okay, hi, I'm Stephanie Myers with Black Women for Positive Change. We're very concerned about this insanity of violence that our community is dealing with. We're working with Congresswoman Gwen Moore to try to get de-escalation of violence training out. And so I'd like to know, is there a role or is there a way that the elected officials can be more involved with violence prevention? It seems like the emphasis is on after somebody does something wrong, locking them up and sending them to prison. Well, what can we do to prevent it? Now, our organization, working with Brother Boone and Brother Fairchild and Omega Psi Phi and Brother Antonio Knox, we've been doing an annual week of nonviolence the past 6 years. And we'd love to try to reach out and see how we can get the elected officials and more chapters to work with the young people on prevention.
Yes, thank you for that question. You know, it's complicated, but it's going to require an integrated approach. What we do in New York City is we have both a community and a government approach that's modeled as the New York City crisis management system. So there is actually money put into organizations from city government to do violence interruption, to go into our schools to do conflict mediation and resolution, but also to do response. So if there is an incidence of violence or shooting, we immediately respond collectively to that incident. We in National Action Network began several years ago a program called Occupy the Corners after the killing of a 4-year-old young man on the playground in his development named Lloyd Morgan Jr. And every summer what we do is go to the most dangerous, violence-prone areas and we occupy them. This year, we have taken it up a notch. We saw an increase in violence among 15 and 16-year-olds. Within an 8-day span, we saw 7 of them killed across New York City. We took it up a notch and did overnight occupies, where we went to the locations where the violence happened, and we stayed out there overnight, had a presence overnight, engaged the community overnight. But it's going to require money, and it's going to require an infrastructure, a non-violence infrastructure that has a permanent stream of resources that can undergird a relationship between the community and the police, as well as other institutions like schools, the hospitals, which provide, the hospitals which bring in the public health component. Violence has to be treated as a public health crisis and not a criminal justice crisis.
And I think one of the things that we've tried, and I like that idea, it is an integrated approach, but one of the things that's very serious about it has to do with most of the violence that I'm seeing in Mercer County and in New Jersey and across in New York, because I was a policeman in New York, has to do with black-on-black crime, violence. So we have to look at what is the cause, what is for that, and how do we deal with that? I am the supervisor of a police chaplaincy program that deals with relationship with the police, but it's more a relationship with the community and getting people to step up and say, yes, we do have children that have mental health issues. Yes, they've joined a gang, and why? What are we offering as alternatives? And I'm not pointing the finger at where they are, but we need to go in deeper, and this is where we need to work. Schools, yes. Programs, what's available? I've had a young man who was an OG in a gang, and he said, I don't want my children going deeper into gangs. What can you do? No, we started the community college sessions, gave them a room at community college where kids could have alternative to gangs. They can't get from their doorstep to the school without being attacked. That's serious stuff. See a kid peep out the window and run to the bus because he'll get intercepted by some knucklehead who wants to take his money. This is serious stuff. So we need to go back, and someone talked about it yesterday, about love and care and offering alternative to young people so they don't need to go into a gang for protection.
Good afternoon. I'm at the mercy of the clock. One,
Sure.
two.
Brother Frank Malone.
Excuse me. Hold on for a second. Let me put it in order.
Yes, sir.
1, 2, 3. That's it. Quick.
Brother Frank Malone, yesterday I was on WOL for 1 hour on fatherhood across the nation, thanks to the co-chairs and the chairs of the Women for Positive Change Against Violence. Here's my question, and Nick Charles, you know about this. We as men, how do we legislate change in each of the jurisdictions that we represent? Yesterday I talked about Marco Wright, your school and what you're doing, the Omegas, the Kappas, the Alphas, the National Action Network. How do we legislate black fathers making change at the State House? That's my question.
Thank you, Brother Malone. You might want to address that real quick?
Yeah, I'll address it real quick. So it all boils down to us coming together. You know, with your organization, 100 Fathers, you know, a lot of the great work you guys done, and when we actually were able to get the commission set up in the county to make sure we have a fatherhood commission in place now. But it takes all of us coming together. You find a lot of times that folks sit idle, but we got to make sure that we continue to spread the word. We make sure the brothers pass the word and the sisters also pass the word. But it's going to take a collective effort for all of us to come together to get that legislation across the board.
Brother McMillan, North Carolina. I want to expound on the comment made by the brother as it relates to the Electoral College. It is an element that we are not participating in at all. Each congressional district in the country has a congressional meeting. At that meeting, the presidential electors are elected, but you must go to your precinct, from your precinct to your county meeting to get your name on the list to go to the congressional district meeting to vote. You can't go to the district congressional meeting and vote if your name is not on the list. There's no money required, no nothing. You just have to get your name on the list, go to the district congressional meeting each year that is held to vote on the presidential elector. We need to get involved in that because very few are doing it. And in the state of North Carolina, I guess you're aware now, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on redistricting, and there's serious gerrymandering and trickery going on in the state of North Carolina. And I want to encourage all the brothers across the country, involve yourself in going to your congressional district meeting when it is held. Thank you.
Yes, if I could deal with that very quickly. Redistricting is a serious obstacle that we have to face. There was an intentional program by the Republicans and the conservatives called red mapping, which was the permanent restructuring of Congress to the right, which is why you have what seemingly is a permanent Republican control of Congress. Redistricting happens on the local levels. So your local state representatives are the ones that decide what your districts look like, because the state houses are the ones, and the state government are the ones that define the congressional lines within the state. We have got to be participants, as you're saying, on the local levels in local elections, so that we have a voice not just on who gets the popular vote for president, but who the electors are and how the lines are drawn. Lines are drawn every 10 years by redistricting commissions, by state legislatures, and by governors. We have to have a voice at that table so we're not served on the table.
Amen.
Hi, I'm Brother Tim Adams. A question for you is, as you just talked about having a voice at the table and how important that is. One of the things we need to do is have more representation. But one of the things that we find is about the cost of being engaged in the elections for those who are running. And I really wanted to know a quick thought on how you feel about public campaign finance, as opposed to taking some of the money out, and whether or not that will really help our communities as we move forward.
Yeah, but the public campaign financing, it definitely helps. You know, it's expensive, as you know, Tim. It is over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to run just a state legislative race in order to make sure you get your messaging out. To send a piece of mail to 10,000 houses costs you about $8,000. And then they say on average you should touch a vote at least 10 times. So when you're doing that and you're sending out mail, and then when you got to have your literature printed out, so when you're knocking on doors, it's very, very expensive. So where do you raise all of this money? Where does it come from? You're trying to lift every rock and find money in any corner that you can so you can be able to go to Annapolis or go to wherever you want to go to be able to represent your community effectively. But it's definitely, I believe, like you say, we need to really move forward with more public financing. I think it's a better impact because it's a dollar for dollar for when they actually how much money you raise. I think that's what it is in the state now. It's a dollar for dollar. So
one of the interesting points that we just should take a look at is the trend that's happening now. The Republicans came out and they instituted this law, so they opened it up so you can give as much. So they're buying elections. But what we are finding across the country right now, that people like the brother down in Florida and the sister in Georgia, we're beginning to talk about the real issues, and folks are getting out and voting and registering and voting, and they are going to the polls. So there is a trend now that we want to keep it going for 2018 and further, where we really get out there and we start talking and get people to vote. Because we can't compete unless we win back the House and change the rules. We can't compete with the money that's out there, the Koch brothers, and we just can't. But there's a trend, folks. And you've seen it, and there are 4 black folks out there now and running for governor. And why is that? Because we have begun to vote. and register and vote and get more people involved, it can be changed. But not until we take back the House where we be able to change the legislation.
Can we applaud all of our panelists for the information that they provided? But don't move, don't move. Want to have our grand bosses come up and give us remarks and marching orders. While he does that, we want Dr. Marco Clark to come in. And again, these young men have been standing for the past over an hour. We want him to just give a quick remarks about what he's doing over at the Richard Wright Charter School, and then we're going to close out with our grand bosses.
Greetings, everyone. Brother Marco Clark. I just want to acknowledge all these young men y'all see in the room. They've been standing for a long time. They came out today. These are some outstanding young men. I happen to be the founder and chief executive officer of the Richard Wright Public Charter School here in Washington, D.C., and I'm thankful to our great fraternity for everything that the fraternity has done to support Richard Wright Public Charter School. Grand Bosses Knox has been a team player on the whole executive council. Zeke Dennison, my good brother, has been pushing us along, and I'm just excited about everything we do. But this is the reason why we're here. All of these young men, we can talk about voting all day, but this is the reason why voting is necessary, to make sure that we open up some lines for these young people as they move forward, because it's getting harder for them. And if we look at the next step, which is going to be college, we're having issues with financial aid. They're passing laws that's going to go against them having opportunities to be educated. And so we got to make sure that we vote. If we push them to look like this, then we got to give them the opportunities to move forward in their lives.
Amen.
And so I'm just excited about what we're doing at Richard Wright. And we're at our school, we do this triple L thing, right? Yeah. We do this triple L thing. We set what? Limits. We teach what? And we do it all in the name of love. Why do we do that? We love you. And we're not going to give up on you, but the question is, do you love yourself? Will you give up on yourself? You don't have to say a thing, because the answer to that lies in your behavior. It lies in your behavior. Because we can look at your behavior to see exactly where you're coming from. Everybody say good. Good. Better. Better. Best. Best. Don't you ever let it rest till your good is your better and your better is your best. You can do it. You just have to put your minds to it. Thank you for having these and greeting these young men every year. I appreciate it.
Let's give Dr. Clark and these young men another round of applause. Dr. Clark, we're going to put some money in your hand, as Grand Basileus Knox has taught us to do every year. The brothers have been a little dishonest with me about what the amount is as they try to get a little increase for you, but we certainly we're going to support you. Hasn't this been a good conference? Yes. Yes. You ought to give Tabiti Boone a round of applause for moderating. Brother Chaplain. I'm going to ask the chaplain to come behind me so he can pray us out. I'll be brief. I just want to say a couple of things. You heard from Chairman Wilson that it's going to be my requirement that every chapter of Omega Psi Phi do a fatherhood initiative where we as men help men be men. It is also going to be my requirement that every chapter do a mentoring initiative, and I'm serious about that. So if you submit applications for Social Action Chapter of the Year or other Chapter of the Year, you won't even be considered if you have not done a fatherhood initiative or a mentoring initiative to help our black men and to help our young black boys, as you see around this room. And we're serious about that. I've told Brother Lewis and Brother Wilson that we want what Brother Lewis does in Los Angeles, where he'll have how many? 800 young black boys next month, and he'll have how many? 250 or 300 mothers and 300 fathers. We want that replicated all across this country. And that's my requirement, and that's my request to him and to this chairman. So we're real serious about this. But I think it's also important to say a word about these other subjects that we've talked about. And one is to Sister Myers, I want you to know that yesterday at the Council of Presidents meeting, every president of the Divine Nine voted and approved to support Sheila Jackson Lee's reauthorization of the Women Against Violence Act. And you ought to give that a round of applause. Every chapter of every organization of the Divine Nine voted yesterday to have every chapter adopt a precinct so that we can make certain that when citizens appear to the polls, that we support them. We voted to support the Michelle Obama initiative with this initiative, When We All Vote. And so all of us will be participating in that for the week of September 22nd through September 29th. And we're excited about that as well. We're partnering with NAACP. You've heard about this VANS program. And so Omega Psi Phi, as I've talked to Brother Lewis, has designated Brother Kenneth Rogers as the point person on that, who will have access to that VANS program. And he'll be able to tell chapters about specific individuals in their communities who either are not registered, who have registered and did not vote in the last election, or they can even target those that may have transportation issues. And it's our plan to not just set up voting registration booths at Walmart and Kroger, but actually to be more targeted in what we do to get this vote out for this significant election for 2018. So we're very serious about getting the vote out. All of the Divine Nine presidents, as they did when Brother Knox was in the chair, we did a PSA that you'll be seeing very shortly, asking all of our organizations to get out the vote. So we're very serious about that, and we want you to know that. We're asking brothers to take this serious. As this brother talked about, this is the election that we're looking at, November 18th. This is the election that we call checkmate.
That's right.
And so we want to check Mr. Trump, and this is our opportunity to do that. So we ask all of you to get out the vote. We ask all of you to mentor our young men so we can have them to be better men. And we will continue to do this, Brother Knox, as you've laid the foundation. And before you, Dr. Ray laid that foundation. And as you can see by this forum, we're still carrying it on in a good tradition. Thank you very much for coming. We'll have our chaplain close us out in prayer.
And then we'll do a group panel shot at the end.
Let's take a moment, if you don't mind, and some male that is above the age of 18 touch one of those males in the back for this time of prayer. Let's all stand. Brothers of Omega Psi Phi, find a young man and just touch him during this time of prayer. It won't be a long prayer. I am a Baptist preacher, but I won't be long. The worst thing you do is give a Baptist preacher a microphone. Amen. But every male that's considered still a youth needs to be touched by some adult male. Let's pray together. Gracious God, how thankful we are for this moment. Thank you. Thank you for the muscle of the mind, the mentality, the models, the ministers, and the mentors that are present now for this very special moment of prayer. We do nothing without your help. We can accomplish nothing without you being with us. So thank you for the power that is imminent in this room, the muscle of the mind that is about to be released into the atmosphere of positive-minded males. Thank you so much. We know that we are who we are because of who you are, and without you, we can and do nothing. We ask you now that you would expand our level of influence beyond this room. Make this a contagious moment. Let us all catch the cold of participation so that we might go into the world and infect them with positive change. We do this for you and for your glory. Thank you for our leadership, and thank you for those that will follow, and for the results that will be ours to enjoy. Whatever we are failing asking, do not fail in granting, because we ask all this in your name, the name of that dark-skinned Palestinian Jew named Jesus. Amen. Amen.